Yeah, the opioids, I don't have to tell you. We all know it's a huge problem. We see it in the news every single day. People are dropping dead from them. It was something that really impacted my family pretty dramatically. So I'm the oldest.
Is that something that did you kind of know something was going on at the time? Or was it pretty well hidden from you guys, or?
We did not know for a long time that this was something that was happening in my family. You know, my younger brother got caught up in the whole thing, mm-hmm. and we kind of had suspected that he had a problem. But it's something that, you know, people who get involved in it, they're pretty good at hiding it. They don't tell you about it. They don't come to you and say, "Hey, I've got a problem, I need help."
So what started him on it?
So he broke his wrist. I think it was originally the big problem was biking. So we were both, as young boys, we would bike. We would get bikes and do BMXing. Mm-hmm. And he got into an accident and broke or slightly fractured his wrist as a young boy. Then we played, you know, he was in a cast for that for a long time. And then, you know, we played Pop Warner football and he re-injured it. He had a number of different injuries. What really broke it badly was at some point he had plates put in there, plates and screws. Mm-hmm. He ended up breaking it very badly. He was working at Discount Tire, and they have those torque wrenches that you use to just torque down.
Yeah.
And he torqued it, and his wrist just gave out, and he had to go get multiple surgeries for that.
Okay.
And then,
how old was he when that happened?
When that happened, he must have been 22, I would imagine. But it was an ongoing thing, and so every time he went to the doctor, they would give him pills.
Did he go to one thing I've seen that's kind of popped up in the last 20 years are these pain centers.
Yeah.
Was he at something like that, or was it just his primary care physician?
So he was seeing a number of different specialists. He saw multiple people. He was getting prescribed, I think, something like 500 pills a month from different providers.
Pain pills.
Pain pills. Yeah. The Oxycontin was really what did it. And so he would go to different doctors around and get different diagnoses. And can you fix this? Can you fix this problem? Okay, if you can't, load me up with those pain pills, because he was in constant pain. I mean, you can imagine your hand is something you use every day. He was, you know, not a college type of guy, so he was out there working at Discount Tire and working at these different, you know, doing manual things. And so they would just load him up. And this was kind of before it's really kind of come to a head.
How long ago was that?
So, which part?
When he was a Discount Tire.
So yeah, that was probably when he was about 10 years ago.
Okay, so I'd gone up, but in knowing you were coming in here, I went in and researched a little bit on some of this, and they give some kind of benchmarks with the opioid crisis on when things really started to happen. So it goes back to the 90s when they really started to have a number of deaths on prescription opioids.
Yeah.
And then you had about 2010, there was the heroin overdoses started to really kick up, which are also opioids.
Right.
And then in 2013, so 6 years ago, the fentanyl, right, the manufactured opioids overdoses started to really kick up. And so he'd be right in that range there, where, you know, as the opioid deaths increased from overdoses, he was caught up right in that. Right in the meat of that. So the other thing that I had read was that the pharmaceutical companies originally had said that there's no problem with addiction on this.
Sure.
Coming through the first 10 years,
they
just kept fighting against any issue with the FDA on addiction.
Right.
With the pain pills, and that's obviously not the case.
Right. Definitely not the case. Yeah, he was fully addicted to them. And we went through a lot with him in different rehab centers and multiple different treatment programs and 12-step programs and Suboxone which is basically a weaning off type of drug.
Yes.
Did everything. and it just didn't take. So after 4 to 5 years of that, he was living with me. I mean, I had to physically throw him out of my house because he was using drugs, buying drugs, selling drugs. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. That's not a good
mix.
Not a good mix if I am in in a house like that. So I had to, I basically had to kick him out. And shortly thereafter, we thought that he was doing well. We thought that this time it was sticking maybe. And then in 2016, got a call from my mom. He hung himself. I mean, he died. In 2016.
I had an undercover narcotics cop on the program last week, and he deals with a lot of this.
Sure.
And what he had said was, the problem people don't realize with addiction is that it's not just a matter of trying to get high, but it's a matter of your body screaming to reach the same place you originally had been. Right, so you'd gotten to a certain point, and your body screams to get back there, and it's almost to go through the withdrawals and to go through a process of changing that is incredibly difficult for anybody.
Right,
and whether it's you're going through a 12-step program or you are trying to go cold turkey or whatever your method is, religion, whatever it might be, when your cells in your body are 100% screaming out for that, it's very, very difficult to stay away from it.
100%. Yeah, it's something. So after Eric died, I was always a big drinker. Always. Drinking is a part of ASU life. That's just a big reason people go there. It's a party school. It's one of the top party schools. I was a big drinker there. I started drinking young, started drinking hard. And after Eric died, I did not cope with it very well, and my drinking became problematic. When I talk to people about drinking, there's sort of 3 or 4 stages. You have drinking that's fun, then you have some fun with problems, and then you just have problems. And my drinking escalated to that point. It became something that I was using alcohol to cope with the loss of my brother and the other stressors in my life. And so I'm part of that community now. I'm a 12-step guy through and through. I think that it has fundamentally changed how I view addiction and how I view substance abuse in general.
So what's changed going through that program? How do you view it differently?
Well, I view it as being much more a problem with our thinking and how we cope with ourselves and our lives.
Stress? Anxiety?
I think stress is, anxiety, those are both, key components to it. When you go through the 12 steps, one of the things that you do is identify where you have resentments. What are those things that are sort of lingering in your life? What are those stones that you're carrying around in your backpack? You want to identify those, really do a solid accounting and audit of all of those resentments, and then find skill sets to release those. Because for me, and I think for my brother and for a lot of people, I think the reason people use substances and become addicted is because they're dealing with those thinking problems and they just haven't addressed them. So they have a lot of guilt, they have a lot of shame about themselves or about their lives, and they use those substances to kind of throw themselves into obliteration rather than go and deal with it. And so by going through the 12 steps and recognizing that you really don't have any power over that substance, you're going to relinquish that, give that up. You're going to turn sort of your care and this idea of your will over to the care of God, and find a power that's greater than yourself, and rely on that God, or what they say God, but it's a higher power of your understanding is how they say it, so it can be all inclusive. But you're sort of separating yourself from the process a little bit. You're recognizing, okay, there's something else that I need to turn this over to and help and use that to carry you through it. And that's been something that I had not done. When I think a lot of people are going through the addiction analysis internally, they're thinking, this is what I was thinking. I'm successful, I'm young, I've been able to control almost everything in my life. Why can't I control this? Why can't I get this in order? Then you realize there are just some things that are outside of your control, and that's the first step, is you got to admit you're powerless over this thing. And then you really dive in and do that thorough analysis. And I meet with a men's group, and we meet every Tuesday, and we've walked a number of different guys through it. And it's pretty amazing what happens when they go through that process and they sit down with a group of other guys who are not asking them of anything, or asking them for anything, just circling up to help them through it. And people start to realize, man, I have this whole backpack of these stones that I've been carrying around. Mm-hmm. Let's dissect them and analyze them, and then empty the backpack. Lighten your load.
How successful is that typically with people?
So, I mean, if you look at the statistics, the 12-step stuff, I mean, the numbers are not good. Mm-hmm. If you look at the data on it, right? People who go through a 12-step program, they don't traditionally, at least in today's era, have a good success rate, from my understanding. And I don't, I'm not a status.
Is that, do you think, because people just don't adhere to it? They don't actually follow through?
Yeah, I do think that's exactly.
So you think that the structure is there for a solution?
Yes.
For a fix?
Yes.
But it's, can you match that? Can you align yourself with it?
Exactly right. Yeah, we do what's called back to basics at our group. So we go back to the basics, basically the same format that they were doing back in the early 1900s, mm-hmm. when they were originally administering this help to people. They were running them through the program. They were sticking to it. Now I think it's been diluted in a lot of ways, and people just kind of pick the pieces that they think work or that they want to do, and they'll just figure the rest of it out. And mm-hmm. it just doesn't work that way. If you don't do it all, the authors of the big book, they say you will go back out and use again. Mm-hmm. You got to follow the formula, and that's what we really emphasize.
So really, I mean, if I'm bringing in one side from, say, the cop that I spoke with last week, where he's talking about your body going back and wanting something else, which is interesting because you're wanting something outside of yourself.
Yes.
Right? Also, you're looking for something outside of yourself to help you.
Right.
Right. But that's a physical addiction there. And then you're saying, on the other hand, though, it's a matter of, it almost sounds like you're talking about a skill, a thinking skill, that you have to acquire to be able to view things differently, your situation, your conflict, your resentment a little bit differently.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there's validity to both of those concepts. I mean, I am not a science denier or anything. Mm-hmm. I do think that when you have a pattern of substance abuse or drinking or heroin using or whatever it is, I think there's good evidence and good science to back it up that says that you're rewiring some of the pathways in your brain. Your body is physically becoming addicted to it. And in order to satiate that craving, you have to go out and use. So I think the 12 steps is complementary to that. And even the big book doesn't say anything about, you can't go through, they're not denying that there's a science component to it. And I think what your other guest was saying mm-hmm. about your body screaming to go get this substance is true. I mean, I know it. I saw it with my brother. I saw it with a lot of the other men that we work with. I see it. These people are screaming for it. But the goal is, what are you going to do with that data? Okay, great. Your body's screaming for it. You have a physical craving for it. So what are you going to do about it? Currently, to my knowledge, there's no medical solution for that. They do have things like naltrexone. They have these implant pills that you can take, which are supposed to help with the craving or eliminate the effect of opioids and those things. And great, all for it. But still, what are you supposed to do? It comes down to how are you adjusting your thinking and how do you fortify yourself so that when you have these moments in your life that pop up and you say, I need to go solve my anxiety, my depression, my girlfriend broke up with me, I'm depressed about it. What do you do? How do you turn to something else rather than go and pick up a bottle or shoot yourself up with a needle? Mm-hmm. And that's what the 12 steps does. It gives you some framework to fortify yourself and then rely on your community, find a good community, get plugged in. And then the real key to the whole thing, in my opinion, is the 12 step. You have to go out and help the next guy. You have to fortify yourself. You have to always take a middle position. You have a guy below you who you're sponsoring. That's somebody that you're helping. And then you have a senior position, somebody who's above you. That's your sponsor. That's the person that you are relying to. So you're fortified in the middle.
That's interesting because in my other podcast, one of the principles that I go over is I talk about a fluid hierarchy.
Yeah.
and how important that is. And so there actually is a hierarchy then in the 12-step program that is set up where you're looking up and you're looking down at the same time.
Yeah,
right.
Right.
That's really interesting. So, I had gone in and looked. I just wanted to get some of these statistics out there for people that don't know. We got about 150 people dying from opioid overdose every day in the country. From 1999 to 2017, there's been an overdose, 6 times the amount of overdose deaths per year. 85,000 people will try heroin for the first time this year. About 1 million people will use heroin this year.
Yep.
2 million people will misuse prescription opioids for the first time this year. And 12 million people will misuse prescription opioids this year, which is, that's pushing 4% of the country.
Yeah.
That's insane. That's the number. We've got a pretty low number right now, but that's the unemployment rate.
Right.
The number of people that are misusing opioids.
Right. It's catastrophic.
It's catastrophic.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not just, it doesn't just impact one person. If one person dies or commits suicide or whatever, it's devastating entire communities, and it doesn't discriminate. This is not something that is unemployed people with no job who have no friends or family. This is getting everybody. It's getting people who are young. It's getting people who are old. It's getting people who are well off because of the nature of the drug. It's just immediately people get addicted to it very quickly.
So it affects others. Obviously, it's affected you.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? How do you work with that?
It's in part by being of service to other people. So my family and my mom is one of the most amazing people that I've ever met. She, after this happened, she was very she struggled as any mom would when they lose their son, but she actually found him. She found him. He hung himself. She walked in, found him, was there. So her life was in complete disarray for a long time.
Sure.
She called me. I was there 10 minutes later. We sat there together, and our lives changed that day. She went through her grief process and then decided that she was not going to let another family go through what we went through if she could help it. So she founded Eric's House, which is an organization. It's at ericshouse.org. It's an organization to help people through this. It's something that has gotten a lot of traction, but basically the premise of that is to help people who've lost somebody to suicide, overdose, or tragic death. And when that happens to somebody, what we found was we had no idea what to do. We had no resources. We had no community to get plugged into. If you're an alcoholic, you go to AA. If you're a sex person, you go to Sexaholic Anonymous or whatever it is. There's a lot of support for it. But suicide, overdose, anything that's drug related is really still, there's a bad stigma around it. And there's not a lot of places to get plugged into, not a lot of communities where you can go and find support there. So that's the mission of Eric's House. It's to help people who have gone through a loss like that. And it's extremely therapeutic to turn around and help somebody else, because it's the only positive thing that you can pull out of a situation like that. Otherwise you just sit in grief. But there's always going to be somebody else out there who's drowning in the water because they just suffered something like that. So our mission is to go and help drag them ashore and say, look, this is what we can. It's a 12-step model. It's how do you help?
I was
the
going to
next
ask you.
step guide.
So what is Eric's House? What does it do? How does it help people?
Yeah. So it is a community of people who are basically dedicated to that mission. When we have an actual house. It's over in Paradise Valley. It's at right off of Invergordon and Doubletree, essentially in that area. Somebody donated a house, which is incredible. It's $1 million property that they just donated, and they said, this is going to be the home base. So when this happens to somebody else, when somebody loses somebody to one of those reasons, they can go get plugged in. We have a triage unit, essentially, is kind of what we call it. So immediately after somebody loses somebody, they can get connected with a host of different providers from Eric's House. We've got a ton of different modalities, different people with different modalities who will come to the scene. Literally show up there and help you through that process, help you through the first 24 hours, 48 hours, tell you what to do, make sure that you're okay. and counsel you as you start making preparations for your loved one. But then after that, what we're finding is that most people are sort of in a robotic state after that happens. They just kind of put themselves on autopilot and get stuff done. They set up the funeral arrangements. They wind up affairs because normally this stuff happens extremely unexpectedly. But after that, they get hit by a train. The actual reality starts settling in, and they need help through that. So we have a men's group that meets every other week. We're setting up a siblings group, setting up a parents group, because different relationships grieve differently. Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem is that people isolate themselves. They kind of do that turtle syndrome or that ostrich syndrome and bury their heads in the sand and isolate. And it's not a good way to process your grief. You need to go and share it. And like I said, once you get to a point where you're at a stage where you have the capacity to go help the next person, there's always going to be somebody that you can go help. So it's to be there, be available, and build a community around that. Mm-hmm. And it was slow to get started because people didn't understand what we were doing or what the vision was. But there's no shortage of it. Like you read the numbers, people are dying left and right all over this country, and Arizona's big. There's a lot of people moving here. There's a lot of money here.
Well, I notice it's one of the biggest, per capita states actually with this problem.
Yeah. So there's no shortage of need for this type of community, and it's growing. We've got, donors are now coming out of the woodwork. We're trying to eliminate some of the stigma about it. There's a lot of stigma
about the abuse
about losing somebody.
Somebody to it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
As far as a stigma that you're looked at negatively.
Definitely, because people still think it's a moral failing. Mm-hmm. People think that if you are using drugs, you're morally bad. They don't recognize that maybe you've got some past trauma that you're using the substance to cope with, and you just got to deal with that. Maybe you were sexually abused. Maybe you were beaten by your father. Who knows what it is? Maybe not. Maybe none of those things. Maybe they're not relating to the addiction type of approach to say you've got a physical chemical addiction. Just like a diabetic needs insulin, this person has something wrong in their brains. They're using the substance, and we have to break that cycle. People don't recognize those things. They just think that guy's just a drug addict. Mm-hmm. He's just a derelict. He's a dredge of society.
How could he do this?
How could he do this? Mm-hmm. What a piece of garbage.
Yep. Yeah, that's a really interesting social dynamic, because it's not just that, right? It's not just drugs. It's like anybody who does something wrong or appears like it's something. I mean, you're a criminal defense attorney.
Right.
So how could you be helping all of these criminals? How could you be dealing with this the lowest end of humanity here, right?
Yep.
It's like that's not really the case, right? You're working with people who have a problem or have had a problem or have made a mistake,
right?
Typically,
right?
And that feeling of judgment is so easy to make it like it seems to me like it's a protective thing for people.
Yeah.
Right. Because if I can separate myself from that,
right,
I can feel better about myself.
Exactly right.
Right. I don't have to lower myself to that level. But the problem is everybody's got issues.
Right.
Everybody's got issues,
yeah.
And it sounds like in the 12. I've never been through that before, but it sounds like the 12-step program at least helps you confront the fact that you've got problems.
Definitely.
And everybody's got problems.
Yeah.
We've got to deal with it, and we've got to help people out.
Right.
And so that's great. I think that anybody who's going through that or that is able to help someone out it's just a good move. We need more of that. We don't have, I think, enough people that can get beyond sometimes that idea of the stigma, that idea
right.
of the judgment, to lend a helping hand out there.
Right.
And it happens in every community, every faith community.
I know.
Everywhere. It's just kind of like, I need to protect myself, so I need to look down over there.
Right.
That's great. I think it's fabulous that you're doing that. So that's at ericshouse.org.
ericshouse.org. Yep. And we have an actual physical location here in Paradise Valley, Arizona.
So I know you a little bit.
Yeah.
And worked with you a little bit.
Yep.
You're a successful guy. I mean,
am I?
You are. Yeah, absolutely. You're driven.
That's good.
You seem to be, in a lot of different facets of your life. You're trying to be successful. You're productive, hard worker.
Yeah.
But there's been that issue with drinking.
Yeah.
So is that just the one area of release that you've had, or is it, because really, I mean, if anybody saw you or was talking with you, it's like everything's hunky-dory and perfect with Rob.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the story of my life, alcohol has been the biggest problem. I try not to kind of go through my life and identify all of the hardships that I've had.
Okay.
You're
not a victim.
I try not to play that.
Yeah.
I mean, I can go through and I have a laundry list of different things that I can throw out there, but it's just something where those are my circumstances. That's, how I lived. And I think I was drinking in large part to deal with some of that. I didn't recognize it. I never went through a strong analysis as to why I was drinking. I always justified it by that. Hey, I work hard. I like to play hard. Mm-hmm. I'm successful. I'm more successful than all my friends, than all my, most of my family. And so what if I like to go and, and blow off some steam and get drunk? So what? Who's to judge me for that? Mm-hmm. Then it started becoming a problem, especially after Eric died. I really started realizing I wasn't doing the introspection that I needed to continue to grow as a man and as a business owner and as a son and, as a brother and all those things. And so I started looking for answers, and it took me a while to kind of get the wheels off the runway a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I finally found a good group and dove into that, like I try to do with anything. And I found that it's a good program. Stuff that I think programs that have good principles. It's not, the 12 steps aren't just applicable to substance abuse. It's a good way to live your life.
Sure.
It's a good way to say to do some.
It's good principles are like that, right? They're universal.
Right. And they apply across the board. If you injure somebody or harm somebody, you got to go make amends with them. That's step 9. You got to go just clean up your side of the street. Make sure that you're righting your wrongs. And okay, cool. And it took me to through the 12 steps to like put words to that. Mm-hmm. So it's a journey. I think we've all had our hardships, and I try to do the best that I can.
What is it that drives you to success, do you think? I mean, I'm looking at it kind of, you've got a very successful law firm.
Yeah.
You've got Eric's house. You've got, is it cleanslate.org that you're pushing? We'll talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
So you've got these nonprofit things, these initiatives that you've been pushing. You're very physically fit.
Yeah.
Work out consistently.
Only biceps.
So what is it that you think that drives you? Why do you? Is that a natural thing that most people have, that they've got a natural drive to them, or is it something that you develop? Is that a skill that you develop?
I don't know how other people operate. For me, I sort of have always felt a burden, and I know there's kind of a negative connotation to that word, but to make the most of my life and whatever I'm doing, I've always liked to play hard.
So like you feel a duty.
I feel a duty.
Okay.
Yeah, that's probably a better word. A duty that I've been given certain gifts. I've had my own, trials and tribulations in my life and a number of different things, but I have one life. I've got a skill set. I've been blessed with a number of different gifts. I'm healthy, and I've got an obligation to go make the most of it. I think a lot of it came, so I have a Down syndrome brother. Joey is my middle brother. Joey's Down syndrome. Mm-hmm. And ever since, and I was raised by a single mom, my dad wasn't really in the picture ever. So ever since I was a young boy, I was the man of the household in a lot of ways. My mom was always going to work, and I had to take care of Joey with Downs and Eric, my younger brother.
So you always had responsibility.
Always had it. Yeah, and we found some videos and the things that I would say when I was 5. What's wrong with that kid? Mm-hmm. But there was always this sense of duty, and I need to take care of everybody. So I always had that growing up. Now, I do spend a lot of time on personal development and coaching, and I go to seminars and I read all the audiobooks, and I'm always looking at how I can be more effective and more efficient as an individual, because I know that my ability, my capacity, my potential is way more than anything that I've done. I feel like I've just got a lot of room for growth and accomplishment, and I honestly, I feel like I'm just getting started.
Just scratching the surface.
Just scratching the surface, yeah.
Well, you're young.
Yeah.
You got a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, and I'm excited about it. And the more success that I have, the more I'm able to be of service to other people. You know, if I'm working a 9-to-5 job and I'm employed by somebody else and I don't have the ability to be creative or to go help or do things that I'm passionate about, I feel like I'm drowning. I feel like there's something more to life. And when I have the opportunity to go and kind of find those sparks and ignite them,
mm-hmm.
It's fuel. It's fuel. I can't stop. You know, some people, when I take a day off of work, which I never do, I don't feel full. I don't feel whole.
Mm-hmm.
I can't just go, and maybe this is a problem, and actually everybody tells me this is a problem. You should just go take a week off, go to the beach. I would go crazy. I would go out of my mind. There's no way that I could do that. It's just something where I need to be going. And I don't know what it is, but it works for me. And every time that I've had somebody to try to deviate me from that kind of natural instinct I have, mm-hmm. it goes bad.
Yeah, so you need productivity to be fulfilled.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think most people do. I just think that people sometimes don't always make that jump or realize it even. You know, the more productive you are, the more, it seems to me that the more responsibility actually that you take on,
yes,
the more fulfilling life you have.
Yes.
And so it seems like, well, it's almost counterintuitive because you are going to have more stress with more responsibility.
Yes.
There is going to be more anxiety. But on the flip side of that, to me, I think there's also more fulfillment and there's more joy eventually in doing that. You know, the hardest thing that I ever did was go on a mission.
Right.
You know, worked my tail off every single day, very difficult circumstances. But, you know, I look back and I could never have done what I did in my life without those couple of years mm-hmm. of learning those skills, those habits, and going through all those difficult times and learning how to work.
Right.
You know, and so I think responsibility is key. And it seems like in society today that it's the exact opposite as what is being pushed. It's about you, right? What you're receiving, not what you're giving.
Right.
And if we can lower your stress, lower your anxiety, lower your responsibility, then your self-esteem is going to go up.
Right.
And your happiness is going to go through the roof.
Right.
It doesn't work.
No, it doesn't work. No, a good friend of mine, somebody who's a mentor to me in a lot of ways, says or explained it to me, and I thought it was beautiful. And it's totally counterintuitive, like you would say, but he says that he wakes up every day and asks God for the right amount of desperation. He wants a little bit of desperation in his life, kind of not too much, where you're wondering if everything's going to crumble and fade away, but you also don't want to live with no desperation. You want to have a little bit of that. I'm hungry for more. I have to go get this. Make yourself a little bit uncomfortable, and it's funny, but I started listening to that or thinking about that, and you start realizing, okay, if I'm really stressed and I have a lot of anxiety and I've got so much on my plate and I've got all these problems, just go do more. Just go add more to that. Just go stack something else on. And then all that other piddly stuff that you were worried about, it's all
relative.
It's gonna get dealt with.
Yeah.
It'll get fixed. You'll figure it out. So just go, that other project, just go do it.
Well, that's an interesting thing, because I think it is relative in that sense,
Right.
and it's a matter of, we deal a lot in the other podcast we're talking about order and chaos.
Yeah.
And I think you have to have some chaos.
Sure.
Right? There has to be some chaos there, because if it's all order and it's all status quo, there's no growth.
Right.
Right. And if there's no growth, you got to fill that void with something.
Right.
Right. Something's got to be filled there. And it's usually not good.
Usually not.
And so I think that, whether it's my political positions or, looking at life, I feel like, okay, I need about 70 or 80% order.
Right.
Right? I don't want 20.
No.
That's not going to work real well.
Right.
But I want about 70, 80% order, maybe even sometimes 90 sometimes. Yeah. But you need a little bit of unknown, which is chaos. You need a little bit of problems and confusion, which never go away.
Right.
So that you can kind of build a skill set and learn to master problems. And I think that, and this probably happens with every generation, and here I am getting older, but I look down at the next generation and I think, you're not learning how to deal with problems.
No.
And if you don't learn to deal with problems, it's not going to make you happier. It's not going to increase your self-esteem. It's going to make you more dependent and less happy, right? You need to learn to create the order out of your chaos yourself.
Right.
Or you're in deep trouble.
Right. It's just like anything. It's just like exercising. You're adding a certain amount of shock or chaos to your body. You're breaking your muscles down. You're lifting weights. Same thing with anything in life. You want a little bit of that. I'm not sure how I'm going to figure this out, but I got to go do it, and I need to figure it out. And then you do, and it's just it's reps. It's muscle memory. Hey, that was a big problem to me. I figured it out. It's a small problem now. Actually, it's no problem because I got through it. So now what's the next thing I got to throw in there?
Sure.
And go get after it.
So what role does religion play in your life?
That's a great question. One I was not particularly prepared to talk about, but I appreciate that. Religion, so I was born and raised Catholic, and it's been a good ideology for me. I don't think that I have as strong of a relationship with God as I should. It's been something that my parents have really taken a big dive into, and they're very involved with the CASA. It's a Franciscan Renewal Center over off Lincoln, and their lives have been dramatically changed. I know my mom wants me to be going to church with her every Sunday, and for me, my relationship is more personal. I do sort of have to force myself to check back in from time to time. The 12-step program is something that is good. It is a weekly time for me to go back and say, okay, yes, acknowledge my higher power and recognize that there are things outside of myself that I can't do, and I need to rely on something else. But it is something that it's sort of, I would say, in the early stages. It's not a real mature relationship.
Do you make any association with your drive to improve yourself with a theology? Do those things match?
So not directly. So I don't think that I consciously will sit down and say, I need to improve because God gave me the gifts and the abilities to do it.
What about because it's the right thing to do?
That I definitely do.
Okay.
Yeah. I feel like if I'm not working hard or I'm not doing what I need to be doing or growing, then it's a moral failing in a way. I'm not meeting my potential, and I've got these gifts to give and share with the world. If I don't do that, it's not meeting the purpose of why I'm here.
Right. Like you said, you do feel a duty, and I think that duty is very closely tied to a moral structure.
Sure.
Right. It's like, okay, what's that duty you feel? What is it tied to? Right. That responsibility and that drive. To me, it's tied to something that is truth, and it's something that is, you feel like you need to do good.
Right.
Or put more good into the world. At least there's a moral backing to that. R&R Law Group.
Yeah.
Your firm.
Yes.
Criminal defense attorneys.
Yes.
Why did you choose criminal defense?
Yeah, that's a funny story, actually. I went to law school to become a prosecutor, so the opposite of what we do now.
You wanted to go get the bad guys.
I did, yeah. I was a political science major, and I wanted to get into politics, and I thought, okay, the best way to do that is go be a prosecutor, go work for the county for a while, work my way up the pole, run for office. That parlays into governor, whatever, right? I'll go that route. So when I was in law school, when you're a first-year student there, nobody wants you to go work for them with the government. You're too young. You don't know anything yet. They don't have programs built out for you. So I could not go get an internship or do anything with a prosecutor's office, at least where I wanted to. They wouldn't take you until you hit basically your third year. Then you can go do an externship. So I had no opportunities there. When in law school, in criminal law, I was always coming down on the side of the government. We would have these, classroom debates, and I would say, well, the defendant shouldn't have done that. He knew better. He's guilty. We should take all his rights away and everything. I was totally delusional. But I was sort of adversarial just for the sake of adversarial. Mm-hmm. Law school is pretty liberal. Everybody there is very, very liberal. And so they were all, rights and all that stuff and blah, 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 blah. And so I would just be adversarial for the sake of being adversarial and take the prosecutor's position on everything. I'd be the only person in the class to do it. So anyways, I went and decided I really wasn't a huge fan of law school. I didn't like to just sit there and read all day. I wanted to go do things. So I got approached from somebody who said, hey, this criminal defense law firm is looking for an intern. Are you interested? And I thought, you know what? I'm going to go do that. I'm going to see how these scumbag defense lawyers operate their business, and then I'll be a more effective prosecutor. So I said,
so you had that stigma already in place about the criminal defense attorneys.
Totally. I thought they were shysters and representing people who were clearly guilty and all that stuff. And even my mom said the same thing. You're going to go work for a criminal defense law firm? You're going to represent those people? It was just kind of that thing. And I went over there and very quickly, realized that the people who we're working with are very good people. They're not bad people at all. They, like you alluded to earlier, they've had one mistake. They had a little too much to drink one night. They got into an argument with their significant other, turned into a disorderly conduct charge. Nobody was injured. Nothing bad happened. Nothing was broken. A neighbor called the police. Boom, somebody's being arrested, taken into custody. Or a lot of it was the drug offenses. This was all pre my brother, but you see a lot of people with drug problems, alcohol problems, and we would see some pretty serious cases where the prosecutor's office was asking for what I just thought instinctively were ridiculous penalties. We're going to send this kid to prison. Okay, for that? He's going to go to prison for that? Are you nuts? And so I started identifying and relating with the clients, and I started to see how these prosecutors were just basically executing orders. They would get instruction from the top down, and they were just automatons who were just executing following duties and executing orders. And there was no way for me to reason with these people to be an advocate for our clients and say, this is something that is not right. This is
so
not
you
just.
Saw on the prosecutorial side, you saw kind of a distancing, an arm's length. Well, in other words, those that are being tried, or those that are what's the term I'm looking for here? Prosecuted.
Yeah.
That is there a lack of humanity at that point? I mean, is it
completely? Yeah, a complete lack of humanity. Two things. One, on behalf of the prosecutors. So I don't think they even cared. From them, it was just a transactional relationship. They were just processing cases through. But also institutionally, it was set up. The structure was such that they had no authority anyways. Even if they wanted to give you a deal, there would be every now and then there's a prosecutor with some heart, and they would come back and say, look, man, I understand this is not right. I feel bad about this, but there's nothing that I can do about it. The policy's in place. I will lose my job. I am not allowed to deviate or break away from those policies. And so I started thinking, why would I want to be a part of that system who's doing this to good people? There are other things that we should be doing to help this person through it. So in other words, let's focus more on rehabilitating this person rather than punishing them. You've got those two kind of theories of what the criminal justice system should be: rehabilitative or punitive. And there was no...
It's all punitive.
It's all punitive, 100% punitive, and there was no way to reason with anybody. And I thought it didn't take me long to realize there's no way that in my heart I could ever go be a prosecutor and do what these people are doing to people. And it was a quick reality check.
It's so funny because it's really interesting how there seems to be an ebb and flow of looking at punitive measures. Right. So, for example, you go back to the Clinton crime bill in the 90s.
Yes.
And it was like, okay, we're putting 100,000 new cops on the beat, and we're going to give you 3 strikes and you're out. And violent crime did come down, right? So you had more of a punitive, prosecutorial side to it that lowered violent crime. The problem is that the other crimes all went up because the punitive system had more beef behind it.
Right.
And so now it's a matter, okay, so we've done this, which is great. We've lowered our violent crime side, but now we're taking maybe a lot of people that may need a second chance or made a mistake, and we're putting them away for who knows how long.
Right.
And so now it seems to be coming back the other way right now. Everyone's kind of clamoring about the justice system is too harsh.
Right.
It's too hard. And I would imagine we're going to move toward that more, make some changes, and then we'll ebb back to the other side again.
Yeah.
Because then violent crime is going to go up.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. There's sort of a pendulum that swings both ways. It goes, on the one side you've got this idea that, hey, criminals should be punished, and then it swings back the other way that says, well, why are we even criminalizing that? In Arizona, drug crimes are felonies. Even marijuana crimes are felony charges.
It sounds good, right? If you're in your suburb and you want a safe place, it sounds good, right? To say, well, let's be really hard on crime.
Right.
But it's not that easy. There's a lot of nuance in there.
Right. Yeah, look, I could talk all day about the injustices of the way that our criminal justice system is structured, but it doesn't make a lot of sense in my mind to be putting people in prison for very minor drug offenses. We've worked on these cases where there are mandatory sentencing laws, meaning it's mandatory that a judge sentence you within a certain range. The judge doesn't have any authority. We've had judges tell us on the record, I disagree with what this sentence is going to be, but I have no legal authority under the law to give you anything different.
That's a really interesting concept, because what you're really doing is you're taking the ability to judge out of it, in a sense.
Yep.
And you're saying, okay, a judge who has met the family, maybe met the person, has a at least a little bit of an understanding of knowing this person a little bit.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Too bad.
Yeah.
The law says I have no authority to change this, so you're going to prison. And it's very, very sad. I think we are seeing positive movement. I know a big part of me is, concerned about drug use and people getting caught in that trap and ruining their lives. But I'm also, kind of ironically in a way, totally pro legalization of marijuana, because I've seen what it does when you start sending people to prison for that charge, or at least the decriminalization of it.
Well, and it's kind of like, does this really help society?
Yeah.
And does it really rehabilitate that person? To say, because that's really, to me, I think about that situation. Of course, the first thing is are you protecting society? Okay, that's number one. But the second thing is for the person that is going away to prison. It's pretty, I think there needs to be a sense of, how are we helping that person? How do we help that person improve their life or change their life if they need to?
Right. Instead
of make it worse.
Yes.
So if you've made a small mistake or done something that you didn't even think was a mistake.
Yes.
And then you get put away, and then maybe again you get put away, now for a long time.
Yes.
You're not improving that person's life. You're not giving them a chance in that sense to. And I've always wondered about some of the terms that are rehabilitation, correctional facilities.
Yes, correctional facilities.
Yeah. No, they're not correcting anybody.
No, they're not.
And so it's like, okay, that's the nice idea of a correctional facility.
Right. That's an interesting point. I've never even thought of that. That's hilarious.
Incarcerating somebody has nothing to do with helping to correct them.
Right.
Right. It's like, and what is going on in those places is not really usually much of something that's trying to help that person out.
No, and
help them give them a better future.
No, and they come out and their lives are mostly over. They have a very difficult time reintegrating into anything. They have a stigma. They lose their right to vote. They can't do anything productive. Nobody will hire them. They've got no real marketable skill sets. And quite frankly, most of them are using drugs while they're in prison, while they're in custody. They will tell you firsthand it's as easy to get drugs in there as it is out.
Sure.
So what are they doing?
Yeah. No, that's a good point. So your law firm is very successful. Why?
I think we're doing things the right way is the short answer for that. So prior to R&R Law Group, I worked for 2 other criminal defense law firms in Arizona, and they were both awful, just from top to bottom.
So you learned what not to do.
We learned exactly what not to do. And I was there in total about 2 years before I realized it's not going to get any better. I left the first firm to go to a place that I thought would do it right, would care about their clients, would treat people like people. I thought, okay, cool. This guy's got some morals. He's going to do things right. And I go there. It's the same deal. Get their money, close the case, get them out the door. And I just thought, what are we doing here? And so Ryan and I started our firm on a spare bedroom in my house on a folding table. Just decided we're not doing this anymore. We're not playing that game. And one of our kind of, we wrote out a list of principles that we want to follow and how we're going to do business. And we've just kind of built that into our culture, that this is not like those other places. We are not going to replicate that. And once you start doing right by people, you build that reputation, and then there's almost a gravity to the firm. And we try to instill that in anybody who comes on board our team, that we're going to follow these principles, and we're going to offer this to our clients. And we're business people also. There's no question about it, right? You have to keep the lights on, and you have to build the systems in place. I think one of the things that separates us a little bit is our use of technology. We're younger guys. We've got a younger firm. The other firms that I was at, they're carrying around paper files, and there's no database. There's no way to cross-reference interviews between police officers. There's no upkeep on the latest data that's coming out about these officers or misconduct or what the policy changes are. There's just no sort of clearinghouse of data at these firms, which I think is insane in 2019. But that's something that we've also taken full advantage of, to use technology to get good results, to keep the pressure, to systematize things where we can be efficient, but also get good results, but maintaining a process that our clients are going to be happy with, and it's worked out very well. We've been very fortunate.
I think the legal industry, I've worked a little bit in the legal industry because of my dad, who's an attorney, but it seems to me like there's kind of a lot of legacy systems there.
Definitely.
And a lot of it had to do with attorneys feeling like I'm a professional.
Yes.
And I have to have this certain demeanor, and so it's things like marketing and other things. It just wasn't really kind of part of what you would do.
Yes.
Right. There was a feeling like, no, I'm a professional. They need to come to me, and you guys really do a great job in marketing. You do your videos.
Yes.
On your Facebook page. How many of those are you doing?
So I am now releasing 60 videos a month. So 2 a day is the schedule that I'm on. And I've got a number of different series. I've got a Watching the Watchers segment. So we're actually cataloging police misconduct, prosecutorial misconduct, judicial misconduct. We're watching the updates with the judicial system, the politicians, what's happening with the prisons, who's getting appointed to the Supreme Court. All of those issues I'm staying on top of and just cataloging those for people. But then I also release just purely informational videos. And this goes to your point. I think a lot of attorneys are operating in the past. They've always seen themselves as sort of the gatekeepers of information. You have to come to me and pay my fee in order to get access to the information that I have. That's their only card. And
so, it sounds like you're doing the exact opposite.
100%.
You're just putting it out there.
The exact opposite. Yeah, I have a number of videos that say, you don't even need to call me. This is good information. Just go do this with your case, and it's going to solve the problem. And I give people my opinions on judges and different laws and how to avoid this and what to do. And it's been a tremendous response. People are hungry for that information. And there's no reason, in my mind, in this era, to put that behind a paywall. What ends up happening, just so people know, people watch the video and they go, "Hey, I like that guy. He knew how to answer that question," and they call us and hire us anyways.
Yeah.
So it's info marketing, and it's working very well. That's why we decided to basically triple our production of content.
You've done a lot of, like you said, you go to a lot of seminars.
Yeah.
To kind of improve your business. What are some of the things that you've learned from doing that? What is, apart from marketing and maybe using social media, what are some of the things that you think have had the most impact on what you're doing with your law firm?
It's a great question, and there's a lot there. Most of it that I find is not tactical. It's not, you should be doing this video or posting on this social media platform or using this software. Those are all good little tips, but the vast majority of content that has been most instrumental is mindset. It's strategic. It's to think bigger is probably the biggest one that I've ever had. It's just to think bigger. Basically, do what you're doing and multiply it. Mm-hmm. Just add a 0 to the end of everything, right? And if you're doing this, you can be doing 10 times as much as that. And just make that mindset shift.
You got to believe that. You've got to put yourself in a position where you actually believe that.
You do. Yeah, and the goal is, look, you probably are not going to be able to do 10 times of what you're doing, but if you hit 5 times of that, it's awesome. You've made a dramatic change.
Shoot for the stars and hit the moon.
Exactly right. Yeah. Those are the big takeaways.
Lastly, is it Clean Slate Sobriety?
CleanSlateSobriety.org. Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So this is something that is part of this is a good cap on everything. This is kind of the culmination of a lot of different things going on in my life. So I recognize that there are these weird intersections going on where I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I am somebody who is an alcoholic, right? I'm in the 12-step program. Mm-hmm. I lost a brother to suicide and substance abuse and overdose. And these weird things kind of just all came together, right? That's kind of a weird mix of things. And so this idea came out of being of service to others. So what I do with Clean Slate Sobriety is I go and I give workshops at recovery and treatment centers. So I actually go in to these facilities. I'm scheduled for 2 tomorrow. I've got back-to-back. It's a 2-hour workshop, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening or in the afternoon. And it's really comprised of 2 parts. One is I give everybody at this center kind of a crash course on Arizona law. Arizona is not California or not Colorado. If you get charged with a drug or an alcohol crime, you're either going to jail or to prison. It depends on what your record looks like, but it's very serious. So it's kind of a crash course on that. I walk them through it and say how quickly something can escalate from a very simple traffic ticket to a manslaughter charge with just a couple of minor tweaks in the facts. A couple things change and your DUI turns into a manslaughter case and you go to prison for 7 years, just with the minor tweaks here and there. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of a come to Jesus moment to them. If you can say, look, you're in this center. If you're not taking this seriously, you may not be back here again. You may be in prison. You may be going through the criminal justice system. How do I know that? Well, I practice in that. It's what I do. And I've seen it multiple times, and it's not a joke. So take this seriously. The second part of it is really where the clean slate part comes in. So what we're doing is we're actually identifying people there who have either open cases or closed cases with criminal convictions, and then we're working them through the process of clearing their records off. So in Arizona, we have what's called a motion to set aside your conviction. It's the closest thing that we have towards an expungement. So they go, what we do in that second hour is give them the tools that they need and the actual forms. I bring the forms, the stamps, the envelopes, everything. If it's appropriate, we fill out the forms. We get everybody in the group to write character letters for each other. They've all been in these workshops. They've been working with each other for usually 30 to 60 days. So they know each other. They can say with a clear conscience that, I've been working with this person. They're taking their recovery seriously. They're doing a good job. They're participating and all that stuff. So they can write character reference letters for each other and then get those motions filed so that by the time they come out of the treatment center, at least the process has been started or they have the tools they need to finish it so that they have a clear record when they get out of there. They come out with a new kind of grasp on life. They're sober. They're in their right mind for the first time in a long time, many of them. And their records are cleared or being cleared so that they can go apply for jobs, apply for housing, and get that legal stuff just taken care of. And so they, I think it's been very well received. People relate to me. I can say, I know what you're going through. I've gone through it. I know those of you who have lost somebody. I've lost somebody. And now with my skill set as a criminal defense lawyer, this is what I'm doing to help be of service to you. It's my 12-step, how can I go be of service? And so we're not, we don't charge anybody anything. It's just, let's just go do this. And it's been very well received. I'm excited to do it. I always get jazzed up that I can.
Where are you at typically doing this? Where are you doing these?
So I go to the actual recovery centers. So I have this crate full of all my materials. I have this little dance that I do to explain to people.
That's a little terrifying.
It's a whole show. It's horrendous. They all look at me and I go, look, but I tell you what, they all remember it. It's a mnemonic thing that I do, and they all remember exactly how to do it, and I don't think they'll ever forget it. So I go and I actually bring all my materials, set up shop. It's a 2-hour deal. And so, tomorrow I'm in, actually both the centers are in Scottsdale. They usually have a pretty big, working room where they do their group sessions. So I just take over a 2-hour session for them and say, whoever you have speaking today doesn't need to come in. I'll kind of come in and do a legal clinic for all of your members. And usually people are, they're very receptive of it because it's entertaining. It's not, I don't stand there and read from a constitutional law book about, whatever. It's actually, pretty engaging. I usually get a lot of great questions, and they're all very appreciative that they can begin turning that page. It's been very good.
Right.
It's been a lot of fun.
Well, great. A lot to talk about. You're a very productive guy, and you definitely go after that duty that you're trying to follow. So,
well, I'm excited for you too. This is great. I'm thrilled that you're jumping into the podcast.
Yeah. Well, and you've got your Gruler Nation and
got a podcast. Yeah. So we're podcast bros now.
Yeah, that's right. It's kind of fun. We'll see what happens with everything.
Yeah.
So, anyway, Robert, appreciate it.
Thanks, Greg. Enjoyed being here.
All right.